Part of the safety planning that I did with victim services was to always know where I was at if I wasn't home. It wasn't good enough to know that I was traveling north. I needed to know what road I was on, what was the last crossroad. For the areas that I travel on a regular basis, I can pretty much tell you whose house I'm going by at any point in time. So they were ways that I learned to deal with things to keep myself safer.
I think it's really important in terms of best practices for us to be thinking about those kinds of circumstances that create the conditions for domestic abuse to occur, or especially homicide circumstances. So one of the things that we need to think about is safety planning with women and children, and about the importance of safety planning in partnership with others in the community. So really it's important for us not to work in isolation, but to work with women's advocates in the community and individuals in the mental health fields and counseling areas, so that we can engage families in an array of resources that's going to help them.
There are some really unique challenges or barriers that rural women face, and some of those are structural or systemic in nature. So there's a lack of services, there's a lack of transportation, employment opportunities, health and mental health services, housing. So those make it much more difficult to leave. There's also a lack of access to information and resources. So whereas a woman in an urban center might surf the net and get a lot of information about the signs of abuse and what to do and safety planning, in rural areas there's often no access to high-speed dial-up. So there's not even that avenue. So there can be a lot of isolation, both the physical and remoteness of living in a rural community, and then even just being able to connect with others outside. There's also a lot of blaming in rural communities. There's a lot of community norms and values around keeping it in the family and not sullying the name of your partner, who might be a respected person in the community, in a rural community.
And I think safety planning historically has sort of been around making sure that she has all the records, keeping them safe, and, doing workplace safety planning. So basically we have this assumption that we have a client who knows where all the paperwork is, that she has the English language, that she has a job. So we have created safety plans around that. The clients that I work with, almost majority of them, I would say 98% of them, want me to have a safety plan with them living with the batterer. So they don't want to leave. And so if they're not going to leave, then what is it that I need to put into place? If she's going to stay with him, how do I put a safety plan into place where I can make sure that she is safe?
Rural homes typically have multiple firearms for hunting, pest control, target practice for the farm. Hunting could be several rifles and shotguns. So I think it really speaks to the need not only to recognize firearms as a lethality risk, but to understand that there is a cultural aspect to interpreting that risk. And the lived reality of many of these women is that it's as common as the soccer ball or baseball bat in the home. And even though I've been threatened with it, he wouldn't really kill me. So there's quite a desensitization and minimization of risk.
With regard to First Nations women, Indigenous women, their situation is different than it is for women who are not Indigenous. That has to do with communities that they live in. It has to do with our understanding of our relations with each other. And it has to do with living conditions. And the living conditions are poor.
The needs of immigrant women differ from most of the mainstream women. One is because of language, that if they don't have the English language, then that makes it very difficult for them in terms of understanding and accessing services and resources. So that is one. The other fact that can be very different is the fact that her status to be in this country could be dependent on the perpetrator, and therefore anything that she does could trigger, issues for her children, and for him. And so therefore that becomes a huge issue. The third is whether she has the ability to have a job. If her status is such that does not allow her to work in this country, then it makes her extremely vulnerable in terms of us being able to help her access resources to become independent. So when you're looking at immigrant women, there are multiple levels of bias and discrimination that is already put into place. It's very important for us when we're working with immigrant women to sort of think that the services that we have already planned in terms of battered women till now might not necessarily fit.
The best practice always for us is to make sure that we're thinking about child safety. And children's safety is tied to women's safety. Children are safest when their moms are safe. So it's really trying to work around helping make sure women are safe in situations where we're worried about homicide.
I've had a child welfare worker tell me, well, she's gone to a shelter 2 times, she's gotten 3 orders for protection, this woman can't protect herself or her children. Therefore, we need to remove the children from her custody. And on the other hand, I see that as only the tip of an iceberg of many safety strategies she's taken. Some of those are very difficult to take. She has to go down to the court. She has to take her children, go to a shelter that sometimes is crowded and noisy. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Probably on a daily basis, she's doing many, many other things. I think we often undervalue those strategies she's using. And we also underestimate the danger that violent fathers represent to their children.
We've had great success in the London area doing some collaborative work when we've identified a high-risk situation. So we've done actual safety planning as a group. We've brought in our partners from the probation services, from police services, from women's advocacy services, and from male batterers program services, and ourselves. And actually in one situation there was a women's advocate from the CAW to help her navigate her way through her workplace. And when we bring all those people together, it's quite amazing how, resources open up, how we work together so that we have the same information and we're not working at cross purposes. And I think we're strengthening the safety net for women and children when we do that. And I think we also, as part of that safety planning, have the woman and those people who are supportive to her, so her neighbors and her family and whomever she determines is a support person to her, come as well. And then when we're not there and she has a crisis, someone else understands the direction we're going. And we also safety plan with the male who's been battering in that case, or with the person we're worried about, so that we can say, we want you to understand that you need to be safe. We want you to understand how you can be part of the safety plan. So it's kind of exciting because I think that collaboration has really made us all feel like we're doing something more tangible to shift the trajectory of this, what we feel to be as a path they're going down that could be fatal.
I think it is very important that we map our communities, that we need to look and see who's living in it, that who is accessing the services, and that who are the people who are providing the services. So if you are a service provider and you have certain groups that are living in your community, but you don't see that community through your door, that means you are not providing the service that is appropriate to them. And that is when you need to do a self-assessment of your organization and really look at trying to hire somebody that looks like that community, so that then that community can come to you.
So what we really need to do is to train people in the legal system and in the police about how to approach Aboriginal women and domestic violence. And I think we've started some of those things, and we've certainly talked about that in our agency, about actually having trainers where we could bring people in and have that kind of learning process go on, where we could help people to understand what some of those cultural differences are.
when we develop a domestic violence policy for women, often who we develop it for are for white women. And when we develop domestic violence policy, what we should be developing for is women who are poor, women of color, First Nations women, because it's often these state interventions who are the most oppressive for those women. And if we can develop policy that meets their needs and we provide them with a full-rounded package of services that include not only criminal justice intervention, but other interventions like affordable housing, affordable childcare, employment, accessibility to adequate housing, education. When we provide the whole package to those women, then that's a good policy, and it will translate up to other women, such as white women or middle-class women.